Hello, Whitewater students. Rick Olling here. Happy Thursday to you. This is a video I'm creating that I want you to think of as a sequel to our first meeting time. I'm going to introduce a few more themes and play a little bit of a game of where are we and how did we get here. Okay, and they're tied to research things that we'll look at later in the semester. So I think I may have mentioned before, over my shoulder here is a painting called The King by a German painter named Max Beckmann. And came upon this fascinating account. I won't read it out to you, but let you know what's going on here. So it would happen in the spring of 1933. Um, the writer of this book, Stephen Lackner, who knew Beckmann, went to another small German city to see an exhibit of Beckmann's paintings. And the exhibit had been taken down. But the gallery owner, seeing that Stephen Lackner knew Beckmann's work and was a passionate fan, he said, "Well, all right, I'll let you see the paintings, but don't let anyone know." And they went into the basement, and the paintings, you had to imagine this under like a bare bulb. Uh, they looked at the paintings down there. Now, what's going on there? Who's Max Beckmann? Uh, why was he famous enough to have an exhibit in a gallery to himself and to have a person, come from another part of Germany to come see it? I mean, he was a famous artist at that time, but something's going very wrong here. Why has his exhibit been taken down? Um, why are the paintings in the basement? All right, why are we here? Most of you will not be familiar with the story of Iphigenia, but let me give it to you really briefly here, and then we can try to figure out what's going on uh, in this where are we now game. So, according to Greek myth, the Greek allies, they had kind of gathered together to fight Troy, different Greek cities, and they were at a place called Aulis, and they were to be led by a man named Agamemnon, the king of the forces, King Agamemnon. And it was his brother, Menelaus, whose wife, Helen, had either run away or been stolen away by Paris of Troy. So the whole war is dedicated to getting Helen back from Troy. These are stories that we'll return to later. Um, and King Agamemnon is in charge of the forces. But they're ready to go, but they can't go anywhere because the winds refuse to blow. And the priest, Calchas, says that it's because the Greeks have offended the goddess Artemis, goddess of the hunt, solitude, a very aloof figure oftentimes uh, in Greek tragedy. And so to be able to have the wind shift, Agamemnon's going to have to sacrifice what he loves most, which is his teenage daughter, Iphigenia. All right. Long story short, at the close of the play, that does seem to be what happens. Iphigenia is taken up to the sacrificial altar, and the Greeks are prepared to sail. And sure enough, the winds begin to blow. The Greeks sail off. Uh, Iphigenia's mother, Clytemnestra, returns to her home city where she plots for 10 years to murder her husband when he returns for allowing their daughter to be killed. And King Agamemnon, I think in some versions, he's actually the one who cuts his own daughter's throat, believes that he's done this terrible thing, but the idea is that she's the first casualty of the Trojan War. There's a very noble sacrifice that she should have been proud to do it. And it was true. Iphigenia had come around to the idea by the end. She did go to her death head held high. This play begins with her in the afterlife in a way. She turns out she was whisked away to a place called Taurus. All right. So I think this is establishing a mystery. Who did it? Who took her away? Where has she been removed to? It does seem like she's been granted a sequel, a brand new beginning. Teenage girl. She'll never see her family again. At least she believes she never will. And those of you who know some of these other figures, Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, know that their story will grow more and more tragic in a series of murders. Uh, within the family. So we'll leave Ephigenia there. Second mystery. Third one, I'll have to solve for you. I don't see you guys having a chance this semester to read a 750-page novel by Joyce Carol Oates, but she sets up a great mystery at the beginning. A guy, his name is, I should get his last name. I can remember his first name here. Uh, his last name is, yes, McLaren. Whitey McLaren. So Whitey is driving home from work one day. He's in his mid 60s. He owns a print company, and he has for decades. But a lot of people in the city of Hammond, New York, where we are, know him as the former mayor, Republican mayor for around 10 years. A very popular mayor, liked by both Democrats and Republicans. Kind of mayor gets a lot of things done, coming from the business community, a lot of stuff just kind of, you know, his deals made. And it's been, I don't know, 10 years since he was mayor or more. But, that's the kind of role he's going to be defined by, to the rest of his life. And he's pulling off on his exit late afternoon, and he sees two vehicles, a police car with its lights going, and an ordinary enough, compact car. So what strikes his attention, makes him pull over and stop, is that the police seem to be behaving quite brutally with the person they've pulled over. The police are both white, and he can make out that the uh, driver of the car, who's been taken out of the car, is dark skinned. And he can tell that the police are being quite rough with this person. He doesn't see, from where he's looking, if there's any justification for it. And he falls right back into that old role that he's always known himself as, the former mayor of the city. He figures if he identifies himself, he can get some answers as to what's going on here. He approaches the police rather aggressively, and the next thing he knows, he wakes up in the hospital. She doesn't wake up initially, but when he does finally come back to consciousness, he remembers nothing. The police tased him and brought on a stroke. And typical of Oates, because she's such a realist, he doesn't really clearly remember what happens. He doesn't know anything about the identity of the man or the officers. There's no real police report. The police have fudged on what happened. We do find out a great deal of what happened, and information to some limited degree makes its way out, into the world. But well, it's Joyce Killer's. It's realism, right? It's the person who wrote Golden Gloves. What fascinates me about this is that she actually finished the novel a few years ago and held off publishing it until this summer, just by chance. And then the timing. The guy's name is Whitey. It's funny. It's very ironic that this happened this summer. The book's publication would match up with the events of this summer. However, but notice already some contradictions. If this was a kind of an obvious political allegory, and wanted to incriminate the police and say that, this is a black and white situation and the police are always wrong, it would have made the victim the black person, right? He's dark skinned. It turns out he's actually from India. He's a resident of the hospital who's been unfairly pulled over by the police. It would have made him the victim. Instead, it's this fairly privileged white guy. So Oates is always about irony. She likes to create problems, and that's why the books are so long. Is because the problems that she spin out of her books are so dense and complex, and worth not just reading but rereading. So there you go. Um, we have time for one last thing. Uh, let's take a quick look at this album. So Etta Jones is a singer who I greatly admire. I would put her among my top three jazz singers from the great era of jazz, the mid 20th century. Uh, Sarah Vaughan and the others. I would put her way up at the top. But every time I see this cover, I crack up a little bit because I really only discovered jazz, vocalists around 20 years ago, and I would go into a record store and be shopping around for one thing and stumble on something else, and that's what happened here. I actually thought this was an album that I did not own by Etta James, a blues singer, early rock and roll blues singer, who's also a little bit of a jazz singer, but more blues. And I was holding onto the record, and I saw her staring at me. I thought it kind of critical way, like, pay attention. I'm not Etta James. No, you're not Etta Jones, who I treasure far more. Uh, so the mystery that I had to solve for myself was I put on Twitter that she had worked as an elevator operator in Hard Times, which kind of made sense. Etta James is so much more famous, but Etta Jones, as great as she is, never sold as many records, or never had as much money, so she could take off, for the jobs. She had to work other jobs at different times in her career. And I thought, oh my God, I hate the professor in me. Hates putting out information that's inaccurate. My dad was a historian. My mom had a great regard for history, and I was like, oh no, I made this huge mistake. It must have been somebody else. So fortunately, I was able to look around on the internet last night and find out that yes, it was Etta Jones who had to work as an elevator operator. I found it in one of the obituaries about her. So I'm not raising this information idly. It's to begin our discussion about research and the reliability of the internet. There are so many things about the internet that are wonderful, but how it is used is key. Notice that I didn't count on just kind of a random find. I looked for something rather reliable, an obituary, a commission piece that had to be published in a newspaper, had to have a certain credibility. One of the reasons that last night I was particularly skeptical was I was also looking for a poem just maybe half an hour before that. And I used a portion of the poem. It took me to this guy's website. He seemed like a nice guy. He had butchered the poem, cut parts of it off, given the wrong translator, which to me is a huge deal. And then he said something else in the commentary that was wildly off the mark. I thought, and then he gets to post this in this pretty wallpaper behind it and all, and make it all look very official. And to a scholar, it was like something out of a nightmare. All right, so we are going to be very concerned with scrupulous citations and being good scholars. The irony is that I love research because of curiosity, but because of my passionate interest in research across many, many topics, I do hold myself to a pretty high standard, and I felt hugely relieved last night to discover that Etta Jones did have to work as an elevator operator in the 1950s because she didn't have enough success, financial success, as a jazz singer. Very few jazz singers would have had that kind of money. Uh, Side note, I also think it is funny that it's Etta Jones that is the person. The picture I showed you, she was a little intimidating. This is a more familiar shot of Ed Jones. Now, if you're going to get on an elevator and have someone take you up to the 33rd floor, wouldn't it be nice if it was someone with such a pretty and friendly face as Etta Jones? One of my favorites.